having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1994, Fact or Fiction, Validating Family Stories for Accurate Genealogy. This is one of my favorite things to do, is to go in and find, prove whether a story is true or not. What is the actual story? If it's based on truth, what is the real story behind it? But at the same time, you can also discover amazing things about your ancestors, things that nobody knew about, which is kind of cool. So let's get started here. We've got, start with what you know, write it down, record the family story exactly as you've heard it, including phrases and tones. If you have the time, when you are researching this and getting told the story, make sure you can record it. Then you've got the transcript. Acknowledge that stories might differ depending on who tells them. So if you have an older generation there, ask 2 or 3 people about that particular incident and just see how the stories change. Because stories can contain kernels of truth hidden among the embellishments or the errors. And we know that if you are a storyteller, you are going to embellish the story. You're going to put your twist on it. So if you can get 2 to 3 people within the family to tell the same story at different times when you're interviewing them, and you can record it, then you can see what are the kernels of truth, that what are the things that run consistently through the story, and that can give you a place to start. Then we're going to evaluate the evidence. Locate the primary sources like birth certificates, marriage records, death records, property deeds. And property deeds are gold for verification. Search for patterns, compare dates, places, and events mentioned in stories with documented records. Use genealogy websites like Ancestry, Family Search, MyHeritage, newspapers.com, Fold3 for military records, and there's a whole slew of other ones there as well. If you go to cindyslist.com, she has thousands, and I mean thousands of websites that you can click on and go to find information. If you go to familysearch.org, you've got the search wiki that's there, the research wiki that can tell you where to find certain records based on the state or the country that you're researching in. Use what is available to you. And the cool thing about the research wiki is that it will tell you whether records are online or offline, and if they're offline, how to get hold of them or who to write to. So in some cases, they'll put who to write to. Understand the context. Look at everything through the historical lens. You got to put those historical lenses on. Investigate the societal, cultural, and political events occurring during the time period of the story. This is one thing I love about genealogy, is that it takes place in history. So you can go and learn about the history of the area, what it was like at that time, what was it like living there? What was their day-to-day thing like? What was their culture like? What were the political events? What other things what events were happening around that time? And this way you learn a little bit more about the history of that particular place that your ancestors came from, which is kind of cool. If a story mentions immigration, wars, natural disasters, research those events and how they impacted that area. Like a family legend about a runaway bride could align with local marriage laws or economic hardships. So they may have decided that, they needed parental permission. They didn't want to get parental permission because maybe the parents would not give permission. And it was very interesting because depending on where you were in history, the minimum age that a bride could legally get married without parental consent was lower than than the groom's age. And at one point, the groom's age was at like 21 and the bride was at 18. So, maybe they didn't want to wait and they eloped. So there's all sorts of different things that go away there as well. So understand the context. And remember, don't look at it from today's eyes. Look at it at what was happening at that time, and put your historical lenses on to filter everything. Fact check with DNA. Confirm relationships. Use DNA matches to see if the individuals in the story are part of your family tree. This could be a complete story about a neighbor. It may not even be about somebody in your family, but the DNA will show if you are blood related. Discover new clues with DNA testing might reveal connections to relatives who hold pieces of the story. A story about Native American ancestry might be debunked or confirmed through genetic markers. Seek other perspectives. Interview relatives. Seek out older family members or those who might have heard of the story from a different source. You can find hidden gems in letters, journals, heirlooms. Yeah, heirlooms can provide evidence to confirm or refute the story. Compare accounts to uncover consistent details or glaring contradictions. And you will get that. And this is what I'm saying. When you're listening to the oral story, if you can record the different oral stories you're told and then compare the transcripts, what are the commonalities that run through it? What are the ones that are completely out of whack? And this is a way that can help you determine whether or not it's true or not, and help you with where you're going to be searching. Share compelling examples of family myths that genealogists often encounter, such as were we descended from royalty, our ancestors stowed away on a ship, great-grandfather changed his name to escape the law. I have come across that one multiple times. There's also, let's see, in one family, we were looking at the connection between this branch of the tree and a historical figure to see where the cousin piece came in, because we knew they weren't direct descendants of this historical figure. While we were researching that, we found connections to other historical figures and other events that occurred that just made their story like, oh my gosh, everything. The story was just, we even found newspaper articles that were written by the third great-grandfather that talked about his time as a boy, how he was influenced by this other historical figure that we uncovered, and how he met and married his wife was in there as well. How he then journeyed to another state and became founders of a county in that state, and then going back to collect his family a year later, and how this historical figure also helped them locate this particular area as well. So there was a lot of intertwining and stories, and they were confirmed by first-hand reports by the individual involved. There was other stories that were there that were told. And there's one about the fourth great-grandmother being kidnapped by Indians and taken up to Canada and sold into slavery up there. And then a French doctor came along, bought all the female slaves and let them go home. 20 years later, she arrives home. I don't know how long it took her to get from Canada down to Virginia, but, she got home and found out her husband had discovered where she was. So her husband had not given up looking for her for 20 years. He finally discovers where she is and leaves. And her 1-year-old baby is the one that meets her at the door as a young man. The third became the third great-grandfather. And so, wild stories. And I've only gone back to the fourth great-grandparents. I'm in that particular branch. I'm sort of like, do I really want to go and look at the fifth great-grandparents and see what pops up there? That might be interesting to see. So there's a lot of stories that are out there. Some are they're either debunked or they're validated based on the research that is done. And you set it up as a question, are we the descendants of Richard Warren off the Mayflower? And now you've got to go and prove or disprove that theory. So find the main theme within the story, and then turn around and put it into a question, and then go prove or disprove it. Consider why stories change. You've got memory decay. Details might shift as they're passed down. You've got deliberate embellishments. Now, who as a storyteller does not embellish a story? Family members might exaggerate for pride or to make the story more compelling. And I will tell you this, there are a lot of compelling stories out there that really don't need to be embellished in any way, because by themselves, your brain's just going, no, that can't have happened. Seriously? Yeah. It's like when I was revealing all of this to my client about her family, she was like, wait, what? And then you have cultural influence, where you've got misinterpretation due to translation issues or evolving meanings over time. So there are words that could be used back then that are no longer used today. So you had to change those words so that they to kind of have the same meaning as the words that we use today. Or they may have been told in another language, and when converted to English, there was some lost in translation stuff going on as well. Tools to help you validate stories. You've got census records to confirm locations and relationships. Explore newspaper for mentions of significant family events. Research court documents for details on legal disputes, land wills, and land ownership. Check passenger lists for immigration records or travel-related stories. You can check naturalization records to see did they apply for citizenship when they got here or after the required time. You've got fold 3 that can pull up military records from different places, not everywhere, but some different places around the world. So that's a good place to start. With my family being in the New Zealand Army, I can actually, and my grandmother being in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, I can actually go to the New Zealand Defence Forces and ask for, if I've got their, I have their service numbers, I have their name, I have the years that they served, where they served, I have all of that information. So I just need to apply for that. And I don't know if they still do this, but they used to do it that once a year, you could request the records of one of your ancestors, but you're only limited to one a year. I didn't know that at the time, and I sent it off, and I wanted my records, I wanted my grandmother's records, I wanted my grandfather's records, my great-grandfather's records. I had a whole list, even out to their siblings as well. I had a list, and they came back and said, which one do you want to do? This is what the cost is going to be. You can only do one a year. I was like, oh. So I'm going to save that till I get home to New Zealand, because then they won't have to mail it to the States, so that'll save some money on that as well. So those are some of the, so you've got, census reports, military records. There's a lot of different documentations out there, directories, electoral rolls. In some countries, they have electoral rolls that provide information. City directories will provide you with information to confirm addresses and, addresses and things. You've also got out there, there's so many records out there, so many records. You've got all your church records, all the parish records, births, deaths, baptisms, marriages, funerals that took place within the church. You've got you've got all these different resources out there that can help you prove or disprove this. And even if the stories aren't 100% true, they often contain valuable clues. So keep your eyes peeled for those clues. And then when you get those clues, it will either help you verify or disprove that theory that you're working through. Remember to cherish and document your family stories, also while embracing the thrill of the fact checking. This is one thing that I love to do. Here is the story. Let's go prove it or disprove it. And when you're trying to prove it or disprove it, you can find other stories all come up that may have nothing to do with the story that you're there, but you found the details, you found the clues, and so you're looking in those clues, and it reveals a whole nother story. Share your family stories on social media platforms and discuss how you validated them. Did you prove or disprove that the story was real? I got a cousin, and he's a 7th cousin who's in Wales, and he wrote this story about, which grandmother was it? He's been writing these different stories and putting them up on social media about his grandparents and great-grandparents arriving in Swansea, I think it was Swansea, in Wales, about how they got there and what happened when they first got there. And he was writing one that was just it was a very compelling story. I wanted to keep reading. And as I'm reading it, the way he had written it, I felt like I was walking alongside his ancestor. I felt like I was walking alongside his ancestor as he was discovering this new town, figuring out where he had to go, because he had a room already booked he had a room booked for rent, and so he was trying to find the address, and the policeman gave him the directions of go down here, turn there, turn da, 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 da. And so he actually had to find somebody else to get directions from as well, because he was trying to remember all of these lefts and rights and straight aheads and everything else that he was given. But it was the story was written in such a way that you felt like you were walking alongside this ancestor as he discovered this new town that he had come into, this town that he was going to be living and working in, basically discovering his new life and what was around. So it makes very interesting reading. And, if you've got some stories and you're willing to share them, put them out there on social media platforms. But make sure that you talk in there too. Hey, came across, this is the story of my 2nd great-grandparent, my 3rd great-grandparent, my great-grandparents, my grandparents. This is da-da-da-da-da. And put in there the facts and weave the story of what you've been able to find around it, and saying, you can even put in there on how you validated them as well. So my question for you tonight is, do you have a family story that has been passed down for generations? How did you, or how would you go about proving whether it's true? So that's it from us for this evening, and how you can, some ways that you can prove or disprove whether the story you're telling is fact or fiction. But remember, most of the stories start with a seed of truth in them. The challenge is finding what is that seed of truth, and then what is the embellishment that has been put around it? What has changed over time as the story has passed? Always remember, I always go back to the example of Chinese whispers when we were kids, and how somebody would whisper in your ear what the sentence was, and then you would repeat it to the next person, and it got repeated around the thing. And by the time it got back to you, it was a completely different sentence. There might have been one word from the original, but usually it was a completely different sentence, because what the people heard, and then what they thought they heard, and then what they passed on to the next person, they may have changed a word, may have changed the context. So it's always fun. It's one of my greatest things is that I love to do is to go in, and I love the stories, because I'm a storyteller. I love the stories, and I love going in and proving or disproving stories. And when I uncover a different story, I'm like, wow. And I've found newspaper articles. I've found articles that are in published books. I've found some of the stories in published books. I have found them in let's see, I've found proof of stories in newspaper articles, in books that were written about the family, in other genealogy things, there'll be like little notes that say, that this person is the cousin of because it was somebody of historical significance, or that they were the brother-in-law or the sister-in-law of this person. So that helps give you a little clue in there. So you can find them in all sorts of places. Just keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open, and don't turn around and go, oh, it's not going to be in there. If you come across a record and you're thinking, no, it wouldn't be in there, go look anyway. Sometimes that record has appeared in the list for a reason. I didn't bring the book in here, but I've got that book about the footsteps of your ancestors, and uncovering stories, and about these coincidences that lead them to this information. If we didn't do this and we didn't do that, we wouldn't have come here and found this record. And I'm just sort of like, you were led by your ancestors to those records. So if you find a record that comes up and you're thinking, no, it's not going to be in there, go have a look anyway. You never know what it's going to be. Leave no stone unturned. So go out there, exhaust all possible resources. In fact, that is one of the things that's in the genealogy standards, is that you're done when you have exhausted all possible resources out there, including bringing down brick walls and that sort of stuff as well. So with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you